Welcome to the Compass Conversations podcast. We're a community of professional peers who love learning with and from each other. In other words, we choose collaboration over competition. Every conversation here is organic. Even the opening topic isn't settled until 5 minutes before we hit record. And the rest is riffing off of each other's brilliance. Thanks for hanging out with us in a new paradigm of learning, teaching, and expansion, where presence and non-competitive conversation create the space to learn without having to be schooled. Please visit compassconversations.com to discover more about this peer community and to include yourself as a sponsor. Oh my goodness, welcome to the next episode of Compass Conversations. This is episode number 17, and it's been an amazing journey creating all of this with all of you guys together. And we're so grateful for people who are starting to discover the conversations and give us feedback. And it's just been such a wonderful journey. So I'm Carrie Lake, and today I'm here with Terry Keebler, Shay Stewart, Christine Dixon, and Will Brown, a new friend in our community. As always, we start the conversation with our invocation. So I will share that with us now and then let you know what our organic little sprouting of ideas has brought forward to play with today. These conversations are shared from our sense of connection, camaraderie, and love. This community of peers is curious to learn from and with one another, living, learning, and leading by example. We're exploring together, acknowledging the interspecies family on this planet, while lovingly including ourselves in the family of life from the heart for the heart. So just before we hit record, we were playing with where we want our conversation to begin. And I'm smiling because exploring is in our invocation, and exploration was where we sort of all landed as an amazing place to begin. Terry brought up too that it's really fluid in alignment with curiosity. You know, where one of the sort of guiding forces or the movement through all of the Compass creation things is asking people, you know, what are you curious about and what is inspiring you? And curiosity, as Terry pointed out, really leads to, or it maybe is born of curiosity, or exploration is born of curiosity, right? Curiosity is born of curiosity. That's wise. Hello. So Terry, I know you started sharing your thoughts with us, and it was so beautiful, and it was just before we hit record. Can you just sort of maybe refresh that and tell us about your curiosity for, you were talking about scientific advances and studying the flow state. Do you want to try and refresh that for us to begin here?
Yeah, I can try because I really went off on a rant. But saying that, it's because in introducing ourselves, there was a real theme here too of what lights us up personally is human potential, and the entire thing about curiosity for me is what lights me up. What am I, what just makes my energy goes through the roof, and what feeds my soul, and all of that. And so when I started talking about where my exploration is right now, it is, I'm fascinated with and love following where science continually is leading people to a deeper spiritual connection with the universe and with a collective conscious. And I was talking about, for example, I love the flow genome and all the studies that are going on about the flow state. And the reason the studies have been supported and funded is because they find the value in it for humans, for businesses and for monetary gain. But everyone that's deeply involved in the studies is now, for instance, Steve Kotler is one of the top speakers and promoters of flow. And he is now talking about how he's being drawn to animals and how animals are teaching him more and more about the flow state and the depth of the flow state, that when you're in that neurochemistry, the level of your awareness shifts to a more connected state with nature, with the rhythms of nature, with the telepathy that goes on in the environment between the animals and the plants and he's starting to become more and more fascinated, which has led him to the tracker schools or the old indigenous teachings of how to connect with nature in a way that brings on this amazing state of interconnectedness. And I find it fascinating how humans, in this day and age, the science has to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt first what indigenous cultures have taught forever. And so it's fascinating to watch the cycle of the rhythms of knowledge coming back to us. And that lights me up. I'm so excited about it. And to be able to talk about it with people who are interested and doing their own exploration in different fields. And it ties together. And these conversations are so fascinating because they feed my curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to jump in on that because, and I didn't share a lot prior to because I didn't know how much we could share. But what you're talking about is exactly what I've been experiencing over the last 8 months to a year. In what I do, for those that may have already looked at my bio, but I'm a trance channel. And I have entered into that flow state numbers of times, and more recently, animals, more recently, horses. So into the horse energy for clients that have issues with the relationship of themselves and the animal. And what comes through that communication from the animal side, from the horse, is that you can talk to me all you want, but I'm reading your energy and I know what your energy is telling me. So if you can balance that, we'll have a much better relationship. So it's in getting into that relationship flow, as you're talking about, as far as, what you're putting off here versus here, that's what's going to get you into the relationship. Meaning your energy, your flow state, your consciousness, you may be wanting to lead the horse a certain way through your verbal actions and your physical actions, but it's your energy. What is your energy carrying? If you're apprehensive, if you're not strong in your energy, the horse is going to pick up on that. The cat's going to pick up on that. The dog is going to pick up on that. And they're going to reluctantly pull away because you're not ready for that interaction. So, and that even comes down to humans. I mean, it's that consciousness state. It's finding yourself and exploring yourself into that deep consciousness state of understanding that we're all here together. We're not here separately. We're here to take on this journey together. And we've all signed our own contracts to do this together, not individually. And when we understand that about that deeper sense of consciousness, you have a whole different perspective. You can go into the grocery store and look at the other humans in the grocery store much differently. You can interact with them much differently. And we've gotten away from that because of the 30-second mind frame or the 3-minute mind frame, i.e. TikTok and all these other things. We have to keep ourselves active only in short chunks of 3 minutes or 30 seconds and not take enough time for ourselves to explore that deep consciousness side of ourselves. Now, does that mean you have to go sit in an ashram or, go off to some island somewhere? No, it just means find yourself in a relaxed state and take a couple minutes to breathe and just relax. And I don't think we do that enough as a society. So
I love that, whether it's through science or trauma or curiosity, it kind of looks to me like humanity is kind of starting to point itself, in a common direction, and in exploration and self-knowledge and self-awareness. Listening to you, Terry, made me really curious to hear from Shay about the rhythms of nature, because I think anybody that spends time with Shay, you can't help but experience the rhythm of her presence. As Will, you were just, as I heard you just pointing toward, is that'd be my word, is that the animals ask us to become aware of our own presence and what our communication is as your arms were going out from your body, different from your hand coming out from your mouth, like
that's correct.
speech versus your energy. But Shay, I'm super curious to hear from you about that, the rhythms of nature part and the flow state that Terry was pointing to.
Yeah, that's kind of the stuff I live for. So I love these conversations. Flow state, I think of it as finding the neutral, which is the space when you slip into that space behind the noise, when you orient to the pauses between your thoughts. And when you can find that, you can really tap into the deeper stabilizing rhythms that flow through nature. It's like a dynamic stillness. But there are, I've talked about this before, there are actually documented rhythms. There's a documented rhythm in the biodynamic world, and it's called, has a name. It's called primary respiration. The original biodynamic osteopaths referred to it as the breath of life. And it's a 50-second inhalation and a 50-second exhalation. And it's been documented in, there was a famous forester, I can't remember his name now, who talked about it when he would go out in the forest and he would find the stillness in nature and feel this underlying rhythm. And it's been documented in like amoebas and slime mold. If you go to pre-conscious, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, like primordial ooze type things. They actually move. There was a man in the 50s who found that slime mold had a rhythm to it. And he did some tests and studies, and he found that this rhythm wasn't within the slime mold, but it was from an external rhythm that was moving it. And when they removed part of the slime mold and it grew back, that part that grew back synced into the current place where that rhythm was moving. So it's been documented. It's talked about in all kinds of ancient indigenous tribes. They talk about a healing and intelligent wind or life force that moves through everything and connects everything. It's found, the heart math talks about it. It's talked about in all kinds of different aspects of life. And when you connect to it, it's kind of more about quantum. Like if you talk about quantum resonance and quantum coherence, that will, where in the quantum world, we're all just waves and particles, and the vibrations are seeking coherence with other vibrations. And on that level, we go from wholeness to oneness, where we're all just one. So if you think about it, we just are really all one, moving in this primary respiration through life. And some of the studies I've done, we focus a lot on the first 20 days of embryology, where we start off as a fluid filled cell. We're just a fluid body, but this fluid has intelligence, and this intelligence is what forms and shapes us, and it's moving us in this rhythm of primary respiration. We're being there's pressure, there's exhalation, and that's what's forming and shaping us. But that fluid intelligence stays with us throughout our life, and it's always there. We're 99% fluid molecularly, and that intelligence is always there, and it's always trying to synchronize to this primary respiration. That's where we find stability, and that's where we find presence. And any kind of trauma we go through, physical, emotional, spiritual, it traps that part of us in time. So syncing to that rhythm, syncing to that flow brings us to present time, brings every cell, every fluid in our body, brings us to the present, so we can let go of all that stuff. So I don't want to keep going on forever, but
Yeah, you're not passionate about this at all, right?
no, the embryo in the biodynamic world, the embryo is our archetype. So we're always, we get into embryology with whenever we talk about the flow of nature and finding that neutral state, and that when you talk about connecting with the horse, finding that mutual field of coherence. And you can feel it when you're in that zone. You can feel when it becomes a blended state and you can move together as one, or the horse accepts what we're doing, or other people you're around, because these vibrations are always seeking that healthy rhythm, and horses tend to live in that more than we do.
And I think, Shay, I think it was when you were talking about this, what really was helpful to me is you talked about that feel in comparison with the ocean, as far as you were saying that there's the ocean. Most of us live at the surface state where it's very chaotic and the waves are huge and we're being battered around. And then you said a lot of people will go a little bit deeper and experience some peace, but then there was the depths of the ocean where it felt still. and it felt timeless and quiet. And that was a huge, like, oh, that's so, does it, because I'm a very visual, I guess, feely person. And it's like, that's what it feels like, is if you could be in the depths of an ocean. And I remember as a kid always, sitting at the bottom of a pool, wishing that I could stay down there, because it felt quiet and it felt still. So when you do hit that state, there is a certain recognition of it, I would say, that it feels quiet and timeless and connected to more than just the self.
Bringing us back to our origins, our embryological origins.
You used a word that made me curious to understand how to receive it, and that was pre-conscious. And I think a lot of the confusion people tend to have, like when you get into spiritual conversations, or what is woo woo, what is pragmatic, whatever, is just because we use words in different ways. And so could you tell me what pre-conscious is, the way that you were using it? What does that mean? Because I could find reasons to take exception, but I don't want to take exception before I understand what you're saying.
It's our biology. So it's how our biology operates beneath our consciousness, if that makes sense. So
like being awake and aware of the outside world, conscious, right? Is that what you're saying? Like our mental engagement consciousness?
yes, everything that goes on. So our brain tends to get in the way of things. But if we slip underneath our thinking mind, that's where we get and become more sensory. Maybe that's what I'm talking about, is being more sensory and less cognitive.
Okay, so it wouldn't be the subconscious, you're talking about something different.
I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like I get it. Like when you said, as soon as you said it's more sensory, my mind understood that.
Yeah.
I hear it as different than subconscious as well. And so where my thoughts are going now is, the work that you do, Will, as a channel, I'm familiar with that space as well, but that stillness, that dynamic stillness, to me I'm curious if that's a familiar way to describe your experiences.
Yes, I mean it's every time I enter into that trance state, I call it my 0 point. It's a complete stillness that takes place. It used to be I would have to be induced to find that, have somebody walk me through that process to find that 0 point or that stillness. Then my team that I work with, they instructed me how to breathe and do rhythmic breathing to find that stillness in my breath. And then it got to a point at which I didn't need to do that rhythmic breathing, just a couple gentle breaths. And that to me was even more impactful, because then I was really at first focused on all of the external, and it was like a funnel drawing it down into that stillness, that quiet, that 0 point for myself. And that to me is the point at which the connection is made. Whether that, what it doesn't matter whether it's animal, human, ancestor, that's when the deepest receptions are picked up. The frequencies are connected to. So yes, and I enjoy that space. I've, even at a young age in high school, I've had out of body experiences. Well, through meditation. Well, prior to that out of body experience, you enter into that 0 point, that stillness, that quiet point. It's the gateway. It's the entry point to everything beyond this conscious experience that we're in. So, if that makes sense.
Oh, and I could go on, but Christine, go.
Question that came up when you were when Will was just talking, a question popped up because I was thinking about, when do I feel like I'm most in that flow state? When do I feel like I'm most like that buzzy, alive, connected, just totally locked in? And there's one is connecting with another human being. Another is connecting with nature and animals. But the other one that was surprising that came into my consciousness was, I get that from traveling.
Mm.
Because when I travel to someplace new, it's like these senses that are dulled in the environment that is repetitive are suddenly like little amoebas, or like they're like wide awake, and I'm taking it all in, and I feel like I am in a flow with the population of people around me, the new experiences, the energy of the land, the buildings, like there's old buildings, what the energy that's coming out of that. And it feels so alive, like so energized. And I always think like, I want to keep this, it's harder to keep in an environment where you have a lot of familiarity. And I was just wondering what other people's experiences of that are.
I'm going to quickly jump in and say, I like the way you say that, because I think it is the complacency of life that keeps us locked in a box that doesn't allow us to experience the external that is always around us. So it's that we have to step outside of that box more frequently. And I know for myself, for almost 30 years being in the military, I didn't step outside that box, right? Because the military puts a box around you and you live in that box. But once I had a chance to step outside of it, my God, there was a world to explore. And so if you can find, and that's why I said, you don't have to go somewhere, go sit on the park bench. Get outside of your box and sit on a park bench. Go sit on a rock. Go sit on your curb.
I have a friend, Irene Salter. She's a neuroscientist. She was a school principal, and among other things, but she's also an author, and she's writing a book called Have Brain, Will Travel. And it is entirely for exactly what you're saying, Christine. She and her family took a year of travel. And on that year, from the perspective of a neuroscientist, she just got curious, why does travel do this? And what is the science behind it? Going back to what Terry was pointing to, that, a lot of people really do want the science first. So she, on this whole year, documented what neurotransmitters are going, what hormones are going, and what is it that happens that you can do to bring all of that alive without ever leaving home. Her home base is Redding, California, which is this tiny little town near Chico. So, she was in this place like, oh, Redding, oh, I live in Redding. And now she is walking around Redding just being lit up all the time. So I hope people can keep an eye out for that book, Have Brain, Will Travel. It's not out yet. So,
Well,
but anyway.
I was just gonna say that did you ever notice that I've noticed that when people travel, they will go to a new place and talk about how, oh, people are so friendly here. They're so friendly here. But what they don't realize is that they're on vacation or they're traveling, so they are really happy and light and in a good place. So they're putting out more of that energy. They're smiling at people more. They need to engage with people. I think there's an aspect of it that awakens that idea that we all rely on each other. I'm in a strange place, so I need to be kind and connecting with the people around me as my new tribe that I may need if anything goes wrong. So there's like this added awareness, and but there's a lack of awareness sometimes of how different you're being. And I just love when we talk about stepping outside that familiar way of being. I love the idea of paying it forward and just like buying somebody's coffee behind me, or even like giving somebody else the parking spot that you were there first for, or anything that like pulls you out of that like little gremlin inside that's just trying to get from A to B and thinking about themselves 99% of the time, right?
Well, and that's one of the triggers for a flow state is not only relaxation, but it's a relaxed, intense, focused concentration.
Yeah.
And if you're in a new environment, you're in that hyper awareness, but enjoying it, so relaxed, and it triggers that flow state. And if you're in your own environment, you probably operate 90% of the time in autopilot, because you're doing habitual things and acting habitually, and because that's how our brains work as far as making things simpler. We just act out of habit. So a
Well,
new and yeah.
that's what that was what I was going to add, because you were talking about, how much you love the science that's coming out, and the science that's coming out around the brain and how the brain works will both fascinate and terrify you at the same time, because what they're saying is half of the things that we believe that we just experienced or saw or know, our brain took pieces, welded them together, and said, this is what you just saw. That's why, like, they talk about that there could be, colors around us that we don't see because of our brain just doesn't have a way to process them. They say one of the worst things in a court case is an eyewitness, because the eyewitness, now to them, they think I saw this happen, but they don't realize how many pieces of what they saw, if it didn't make sense to the brain would fill it in with what it expected to see. And so when you start to understand about the brain and how, like you said, Terry, it's always looking for how to do things with the least amount of effort. And so to think and be engaged and be open, that's intentional, right? You're going from unconscious to conscious. So it's more effort. And so we have to resist the homeostasis and push ourselves into being more present. And I just wanted to say, I know this is a little aside, but like, I was so excited when Will was talking about this, because it's something that I've dealt with a lot, which is, you were talking about horses and people, and that when you channel for horses, that a lot of times the horse's issue is like, you're pretending to, or you're saying this, you're telling me that, but what you're saying and what you're feeling inside are two different things. And it made me think of like, how often, like, how comfortable are we as humans if we're in front of a person whose affect, meaning their facial expression, completely does not match what they're talking about, and it makes us uncomfortable, and it makes us want to kind of like, we don't want to lean in and engage. It's like the antithesis of a flow state. So how recognizing and becoming conscious of, are there ways that I'm doing that? Like, where maybe like society has told me I have to be polite or kind or these things, but that's not really reflecting. How do I get to be more organic and truthful in my expression? Because maybe it'd be better to say to the horse, like, I'm grumpy today, I'm grumpy, but like, let's go and try to do this, but I'm a little grumpy.
It's in myself and my wife and our group, we talk about this all the time. It's finding your authentic self, and it's being that authentic self no matter what. But we're so conditioned to put on a front and put something in front of us that we're not. And so how do you step into that authentic self? That is the challenge. I think that's more the appropriate question. And that comes down to really knowing yourself and not being afraid of what's holding you back, not being afraid of, those little things that are floating around in your head that question you all the time. It's addressing those and then owning who you are. I mean, for myself, when I first started doing all this work, and it hasn't been very long, but when I first started doing this work, I questioned what I was doing. I'm like, am I off the cliff here, or what's going on? I mean, how is this happening? I can't explain what's taking place. When I go into this trance state, what happens? I don't know. I don't remember. And then, so I have to, and it took me like a couple of years to finally I sat up here in my space, in my workspace, and I had to sit here and I just sat until this emotion came over me going, who are you? And when this emotion hit me, I was like, well, this is who I am. The work that I do, this is who I am. And I was still in the military. I was still transitioning out of the military. I was still in this corporate civilian world, all that stuff. And it just hit me, and I had to say the words out loud. This is who I am. I can't deny this of myself. This is really who I am. And when I did that, this peace just settled over. So it's owning the authenticity of your own existence, no matter what that is. You could be in the corporate world, own it. You could be in this world or that world, doing this job or that job, but own it and understand if it's what drives you and it's what encourages you to wake up each day, then own it. Don't put something out in front of you who you're not. Be who you are. And when you do, that's when that peace and that calm and that the beginning stages of that flow state start kicking in. So
bringing me back to what Shay was talking about with the precognition, there is who I am, before I start thinking about it, but that's a feeling, right? That happens through our amazing biological technology, and if we're distracted from experiencing our senses and awareness of the movement that is my life through my instrument, my body, then we end up projecting who I think I am and see what bounces back from the outside world that might feel comfortable or familiar. And in that comfort and familiarity, that's when we sort of get on a track of, oh yeah, I'm a daughter, I'm a coworker, I'm a niece, I'm a, definition. But before all of that are the rhythms, the rhythms that we can measure. But also in my experience, there's this space within which all of that happens. There's a space within which we can recognize that something is happening. And for me, that space is the only word I've found that could even touch it is love. That space within which all is, period.
And that's they are talking about now that the subconscious is like the programming for what you're talking about, Carrie, the biological part of the body that occurs from the I think it's the third trimester to 7 years of age is when the biological systems absorb their programming, which is also karma. I mean, that they're relating it to the old teachings of karma, which is a word that really triggers a lot of people because it has to do with religious beliefs and past lives. But they're saying, well, you could relate this karma to what you're programmed with through your genetics and through your, you know, your mother in the fetal stage, and then through your environment when you're, you know, when you're a sponge. And so the who you really are is like what you're talking about before that programming was received. And we talk about, we operate our lives 90% of the time out of autopilot. Well, the autopilot is the programming that's running the decisions and running. And so there comes a place of investigation of who am I without that programming? Who am I consciously and by choice? And that's the stillness and the connection to the greater picture
And
to me.
that can be so incredibly hard for people. I mean,
Yeah.
I tell you, one of the questions that people literally squirm with and stammer with is, what do you feel your life purpose is? Which is connecting to exactly what you're talking about, Terry, is, you know, sometimes we have to go all the way back to when we were a small child and remember the things that really mattered to us, and what we felt most comfortable in before any type of social conditioning. So, and there's so this limiting belief system that gets really passed around. And so if you have, I mean, can you imagine Will talking to his high school guidance counselor about, well, I think I'm going to channel for a living, you know, like there's so many things that, and that's just something that we can all laugh about, but there's other things that people are actually doing, like working with horses. How many people have I worked with who their dream is to work with horses in some way, and then they'll say, but you can't make a living do that. You can't do, like everybody says you can't. So, okay, is no one making a living with horses? Right? Oh, well, like, because everyone else's fears are downloaded into us. Everyone, you know, and is it practical? Is it logical? Is it all these things? But you can't find your way if you're trying to pre-qualify a life purpose, because it could look like it's got no value on paper. But once you start going down that road, things that you don't know show up, and opportunities show up. And so what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the, we have that come across with a number of clients. What's my life purpose? And they ask that of their higher self. And the majority of the, you know, higher selves come back. Your main purpose is to be who you are, is to be this human existence. Everything else is just the game, is just the process. And so, it come, and boy, this is a thread that can just be pulled forever. It's what goes right next after the question of what's my purpose is how can I be abundant? How can I be all this other stuff? That is the human programming. Back to what you were saying. It's this human programming that we have to stuff ourselves into these little envelopes, and this is what we have to do until we die. No. And it took me a while to understand this. And
What?
and I had to be,
Harry corporate guy? Are you kidding me? That's odd.
oh my God. I had to be bonked on the head so many times by the, I'm gonna show myself here, but I had to be bonked on the head so many times in this woo-woo space to understand that the universe is providing for me. I mean, in ways that I can't even explain, but just as something needs to be paid, there's a refund check in the mailbox. I'm at the grocery store and for whatever reason, I don't have enough that I don't have enough to pay for it in cash. Somebody steps in and goes, here you go. Somebody buys my dinner. It's all these little things, but you can look at it logically with the human mind and go, oh, that's just a nice gesture. Oh, that's just coincidence. No, stupid. That's the universe bonking you in the head going, listen here. If you just release from what you understand and just enjoy this ride that you're on, everything's going to be okay. Are you still going to struggle? Sure, you're going to struggle. But those struggles aren't going to be as difficult as they were when you're trying to put your human construct towards it. So I mean, this conversation could just unravel greatly, but that's, in a nugget, it is the human program is to be our purpose. And that's far from it.
And I would add, just on the end of that, one of the biggest lies we get sold 24/7 is that life is about the path of least resistance. That comfort and, safety and all, and it is the opposite of what life is. And then when challenge shows up, people feel shame and embarrassment about the fact that they're having challenges. And they hide, and then instead of being in a beautiful flow state with people who are, have a grasp of the complexities of life and the ups and downs and can hold space for you, people then they isolate. And there was a woman I was listening to who got breast cancer, and she said she's a well-known woman. Anyway, I'll try and think of her name, and she was on Good Morning America. She was an athlete. Robin Roberts, I think her name was, but amazing story. So she gets diagnosed with breast cancer. She said her first thought was not, am I going to die? Her first thought was absolute embarrassment that this happened to her, because clearly she must have done something to cause this to happen. It's a personal weakness now, and everyone's going to know that there's something wrong with her. And she has a saying where her mom says, make your mess your message, which I thought was so beautiful. Make your mess your method. So she went out and talked about it, and they set up mammograms, and actually somebody in her team offered to be the guinea pig to show what it's like to do a mammogram, and they found out she had cancer, and it saved her life. So the idea of I went way on a tangent, but back to the idea that that life is not meant to be easy. You're not meant to be just a consumer in a box with 2.2 kids and married with, the latest car and the latest iPhone until you die. Like, that's just not it. And the ways that we grow as people is riding those ups and downs. And how cool if you have a group that you can ride the downs with too, and have that flow state and connection in those times.
Yeah.
I hear you saying flow state is not exclusive to comfort. Like, it includes everything. It's all of life. It's the space within which our purpose is already alive and living and breathing in the rhythms. And all this listening, I keep looking at Shay, like Shay, behind all of this, all the spaciousness and the rhythms, and like we were saying, a couple of us were saying that our outside world has the bells and the whistles and the distractions, but it just keeps bringing me back to something that is always alive in me, is how can we best assist humanity? On an individual, how do we meet people where they're at and invite them to see this option to know that part of themselves, whether it's through craniosacral or through a community coherence. That's just always where my mind goes, is how can we assist? How many ways can we assist?
I think that
Well, go Shay, please.
I'll be
I've been
quick.
dying.
I think the flow state we were talking about earlier is, I think that is our more natural state. And we get out of it when we get caught up in the rush of our centralized consumerism life. And the more and then when we get in that faster state, that speedy state, the fears come in, our biology gets confused. So because we're not in sync with ourselves. And I think about, my own life has not been conventional of the corporate. I never went to the corporate world, but I always had this not confidence, but this faith, I guess, that everything would be okay. This lack of fear of trying something new. But that's all I really wanted to say.
They say that the flow state exists on the other side of fight or flight. So that being said, is that it isn't necessarily easy to get to, that it's a step beyond fight or flight, which means you might go through that to get there. But for me, it gets simplified in someone said, and this really resonated for me, is that my life's purpose is to learn to love myself enough that I can remember who I am before the conditioning, before the programming existed, so that I can view the programming and decide consciously to go into that state of quantum, which is love. I can't recognize that state or become part of it until I learn to love myself. And that's the journey of life for me. And it's not easy, and it's not always, it's not. But when you get to touch that state of quiet, just which Carrie always describes as love. And that sounds too overly stated and overly corny or whatever, but that's what it really comes down to, is the disconnect from the critical thinking and the critical mind to recognize the rhythm of being, of silence, and which is love. Yes.
Okay. So
I just
I'm-
want to jump in. We've got maybe 7-8 minutes left till our hour, just FYI.
right. So that's really quick. So this question I'm excited about, because you had me think of it, Terry, when you were saying about the flow state being on the other side of fight flight. So think about, and I've always I have thought about, is this the idea of, is this angels on earth? Is this the universe working through us? But when people have been in those situations where they're in the middle of a tragedy or a burning building or something, and just a normal person, suddenly they are impelled, there's no thought, they're running into the burning building, they're lifting the car off the person, and everyone describes this state the same. They're also really embarrassed about being called hero and stuff, partly because this was not a conscious thought. I didn't go, wonder what my chances are going in that building. And I think it just hit autopilot. And it was like they were guided how to do things that they maybe didn't even know how to do, or knew where to look, to find someone that was lost or hurt. So I'm just curious about anybody's input in flow state for that, because that is such a clear example, kind of like, when we talk about pills and we say like, oh, what if you take what is the pill that doesn't have the medicine in it? The
Placebo. The placebo.
right? The placebo effect. We just accept that that's normal. Like nobody really talks about that. This is also something that everyone will talk about, but I don't really hear people diving into what that is.
I'll firsthand. 30 years in the Coast Guard, doing life-saving, firefighting, doing all that mess. You can have a group of 5 people responding to a search and rescue case that's a life or death situation. And immediately when you get on scene, everyone enters that flow state immediately. It's like everybody syncs together. Ooh, it gives me chills just thinking about it. Everyone's mind thought syncs together. Everything slows down. Now, it's the opposite of true flight or flight. You go into a tunnel vision aspect and everything narrows out. This is an expanded view. You see everything at once. All 5 people are locked synchronously into the activities. Nobody has to talk. Everybody knows exactly what to do. Everybody knows how to respond. And at the end, when you debrief, you're like, what did you do? I don't know. I don't remember. I did something. I did this and I did that. Nobody has a full consciousness review of what took place, because everyone's consciousness syncs together for the ultimate outcome. So yes, I understand that full well. I've done it many times. So it is a very interesting space to be in. I've experienced it, civilian and military wise, or my Coast Guard wise. Yeah, for sure.
It makes me go back to the the idea of that science is now studying all of this stuff in new ways, because people have more experiences to get curious about, I think. And it is science that says a human body can only produce this much strength and can only lift that much. But when we do start to recognize that aspect of us that perhaps uses our body and moves through us in these situations, or when we become available to it, it's like becoming available to an entirely different quantum data set of what life is. And I think, these conversations help us be more available to that through science, through channel, through experience. And Will, I have to say from earlier, I loved when you were pointing out, like, go sit on your curb and make yourself available. Go, rake leaves, make yourself available. Go clean litter boxes, make yourself available. And because or go to Bali, go whatever you're called to, but there isn't one correct channel to get there. It's everywhere. It is the space within which everything else happens, and everybody gets to be unique on their own exploration of their relationship as this individual to that state of being.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you guys are amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone have like a last thought in 2 minutes? Anything you'd like to drop in, mic drop moment, or any way you'd like to contribute to the wrapping of this amazing conversation?
I hope no one can hear my rooster.
Nope, can't hear. Dang.
Nope. I want to hear your rooster.
Right.
Right outside my window.
Oh, it's beautiful.
No, but it ends up it's phenomenal that there is this study. I mean, there is this curiosity and this exploration going on so deeply right now, as I think there's the real division on the planet that's happening right now is the 5D world versus 5G world.
Mm.
We are learning how to stay out of the quicksand of 5G. And we'll end the talk there, and that starts a whole new talk.
I was just going to say that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is and it isn't. I mean, it's the same topic, and yeah, that's where we are on the planet right now.
Yeah. I just think the one thing that I think is the most important thing is to just keep a sense of awe and wonder about the world and life, and both within and without.
Be an explorer. Go out and explore. Yeah.
Shay, were you going to say something?
I lost it. But one thing I will say is one way to sink into all of this is a simple watch the sunrise in the morning. It's very powerful if you look at like quantum biology, it's very powerful for our system, and it opens us up to the possibilities of getting more into these states, especially the more you're inside in the non-native EMF world. It's very important to get out, get in nature, especially in the morning when the sun's rising. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Noted.
Mic drop.
Oh, everybody, thank you. What a rich time. I love you all. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again really soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.